I'm Mark Unger, producer of Roundtable. Because we find this presentation so special, we really would like for you to see this. Please watch.
Good evening. Welcome to Single Shot at Manhattan Neighborhood Network's Roundtable. Tonight we will be talking to a different crowd. Our usual viewers are photographers, and tonight we actually will be talking to people who not photographers themselves, but in one or other way need photographer services and would like to know what it takes to actually be a good photographer and how to choose the right one for what they're trying to achieve. And in order to discuss it, we yet again invited Neil Tandy to our studio, one of professionals in creative photography who have a lot of experience working with clients, and I'm sure explaining them why professional photographer is so important. Hi Neil, thank you for joining us.
Good evening, Alex, and it's certainly a little bit warmer than the last time I was here, and thank you for asking me back to discuss what is quite a difficult subject to discuss.
Indeed it is. With abundance of quality photography that's available everywhere on the internet, off internet, on stock photography websites and everywhere, it's really hard to explain to a particular person why they need a professional instead of, say, just a student with a camera.
Yeah, absolutely. And probably even more so trying to explain to some of the people why they need to make budget for that.
Exactly. That's even harder question.
And it's, as I said, it is a very, very difficult subject to talk about and to try and get the point across. But I think at the end of the day, really what it all comes down to is providing the best imagery, for whether it be for a product, whether it be for a model, an actor for headshots, a fashion designer. The reason that you really need to go with quality photography and professional photographers who know what they're doing in those particular fields, is that essentially it's your image at stake.
Exactly.
And if you are going with substandard, subpar photographers and using substandard imagery, reflects badly on your brand and it reflects badly on your image. For instance, you wouldn't see Calvin Klein, for example, using iPhone photographs or using substandard photography, because this is a multi-billion-dollar brand, and people start seeing, let's say with Calvin Klein, using substandard imagery. It's going to, I believe, give a negative, it's going to have a negative impact on their audience and their buying public.
Well, indeed, it will not have a positive impact, even though with the tendency we're witnessing right now, who knows, maybe in 5 years it will be exactly a fashion to just take the simplest photograph and use it, just for authenticity. I mean, it already became a thing. But you know what I noticed at some point? It's not always about greed. Clients are getting inferior professionals for their tasks, including photography, and more often including photography than anything else, not only because they're trying to save money, but simply because they don't understand. If this guy is offering to do the job for $5,000 and this one is ready to do it for 10 times less, why would I pay $5,000? They just genuinely, sincerely don't know. So
Yeah.
we can try to actually give them some pointers and explain what they need to look for in order to avoid making this mistake. A lot of them would love to hire a right professional for the right job, but they simply wouldn't have a way to tell one from another. Wouldn't know what questions to ask, what to look at the samples they would see.
Yeah.
So
And and I think it's very important also to point out that just because somebody wants to charge $5,000 doesn't mean to say that their product or what they're offering is going to be exactly what is needed.
Oh, for sure. That's
Over
no
and above the
guarantee in that.
$500. And we know that there are a lot of people taking chances out there that will just go, oh, okay, I'm going to charge $5,000 just because I can.
Indeed.
But I think it's difficult to cover all kinds of circumstances here, but I would say in general, what a photo editor or a client looking to use photography to illustrate their product, to sell their product, I think one of the first things that they need to really look for is the photographer going to present their product or brand in the way they want it to be seen
That's for sure.
by the public.
But that's the actual question. How somebody who knows nothing about photography but seen a lot of good photos and a lot of bad photos would be able to tell whether or not this supposedly professional is capable of doing this job. Well, one of the pointers I'm giving to people who are looking to determine that is to look for small details. If there are small unnecessary details left in a commercial photo that not shouldn't be there, for example, leaf sticking from the side of the photo, or a cigarette butt laying on the ground on a beautiful white pavement, that is a sign that the professional at least is not that serious about providing the perfect result. Perfectionism is essential for photo editing when it comes to commercial photography.
Obviously, that's a very good point, Alex. When you're looking at, say, two portfolios side by side, the attention to detail is not necessarily obvious to the non-initiated in the beginning. But I think if they can train themselves to look for points like that, as you mentioned, and also it's very difficult, I guess, for a non-photographer to pick up details such as blown highlights and shadows that contain no detail. Those are things that we kind of take for granted and consider ourselves when we're working. Obviously, it's when you have two portfolios next to each other, the good feel aspect of it is also, or the feel good aspect is a thing that a lot of people would like to go for, I think, as well. Does portfolio A make me feel good about the work, as opposed to, does that feel sterile and heartless and with no creative value in it?
Well, that's for sure.
That attention to detail is, I don't know how many times I've seen, on your point there, photographs of people in front of trees and windows with window frames sticking out of their head and trees sticking. I've seen photographs like that from the White House, from presidential photographs, official photography.
Well, sometimes they just don't have another angle. That's also possible.
Yeah, but those are details which you, I think, can pick up and notice. If it's in a one-off, I think that's possibly forgivable. If it happens throughout the portfolio, then I think you need to take serious cognizance of the fact that that person obviously really, as you say, is not as serious about their job as the next person.
Well,
And that may not necessarily come with the price point, but more often than not, the guy that really is serious and professional enough about his job will be charging more for his services,
naturally.
and rightly so.
Well, another point I can recommend to look at actually is something like using the wrong type of lens for the job. For example, yes, there is this famous photographer who makes portraits on super wide angle. He had some of the politicians recently photographed. You've probably seen those pictures. But he is one of a kind. He is unique. But if you see your, say, average professional who is claiming to be good, and all his portraits actually made with wide angle, basically distorted where the head looks bigger than the shoulders, then it's probably something to be alarmed. Wide angle always making things to look dynamic, but it's not exactly for the correct show of the character. All right, so we'll get back to this after the break. I mean, it's a huge subject, but hopefully we'll have enough time to discuss all this. Hi, Alex AG again from Single Shot with another single trick. Today I want to tell you about using internal flash of the camera. Even some very professional cameras have that, but if you would ask a professional photographer, including myself, you would be told not to use it, especially on close-ups and especially when you're photographing people. Reason being, when you do it, the face being overblown. You're getting practically a white face instead of having nice skin tones and nice lighting. Is there anything you can do about it? Actually, yes, there is. You can just put in front of your flash a simple dollar bill and take a picture. What it will give you? Dollar bill is made of material thick enough to control enough light, and on top of it, it will give you some nice yellow tone to complement the skin tones of the person. This is a single trick by Single Shot. Watch us on YouTube. As Neil was mentioning during the break, it's really hard for somebody who is not a photographer to actually spot what kind of lenses being used for the photograph. So.
Yeah, that's true, Alex. But I think what you were saying earlier, just now, the telltale signs with especially with portrait photography, big heads and tiny little shoulders, and it can be used dynamically. And if that's what your campaign requires, then fine, go with the photographer that does that, if that's what suits you. It doesn't necessarily mean that. But I think also what I've noticed a lot these days is that fewer and fewer photographers understand light.
Well, it's always been like this, actually. Understanding light is probably the hardest skill in photography, if you think about it.
It is, yeah. But I mean, and I know it's difficult for a client to say, well, that's well lit or that's not well lit.
Well, there I wouldn't even have any advice how you can do it. I mean, with lenses, at least the client can ask photographer what lens he's planning to use, and then go on the internet and see what is recommended for this type of job.
Yeah, that's true.
But with light, it really depends on style of photographer. Some are drama queens, like yours truly. I like harsh lights, and I have having the sharp edges between white and black on the portrait. Some people like it to be softer, some like it with light bugs. I mean, for commercial purposes, too much drama is not recommended, but again, some of the fashion shoots being done in dramatic light and they work well. So
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
really hard to say.
I think on that, sorry, in that respect then possibly, when we start talking about photo editors, creative directors, for fashion brands, for designers, for labels, for magazines, dealing with portrait photography, perfume ads and makeup ads and whatnot. There are clearly defined lighting scenarios for each of those kind of aspects of photography. I mean, you know, you're not going to shoot a can of hairspray using beauty lighting, and you're not going to do a beauty shot using generally speaking Rembrandt lighting, for example,
Indeed,
because and most, hopefully most creative directors and photo editors know enough to be able to spot that, and that would be a telltale sign for any of those people to be able to pick up on and know the difference between the guy that knows what he's doing and the guy that doesn't necessarily know quite enough. However, when it gets a little bit more difficult is when you've got, say, a doctor or a lawyer or a banker that needs to get headshots for their LinkedIn profile or for their social media, or for a magazine article or
The website.
For the website, and they have absolutely no clue whatsoever. You know, they can,
And no experience posing besides that.
and no experience posing besides that as well. So I think in that instance, it's very good to not only just look at the portfolios, but actually, if they have time, to interview the photographer.
That's actually a very good point. The
First of all-
professional photographer asks a lot of questions before the shot.
That's correct, yes. And a professional photographer, not always, but most professional photographers will make the client feel very, very comfortable.
At least we'll try.
And at least we'll try, yes. And we'll also try to understand the personality and the character of the client. I mean, you know, you're not going to go and take photographs of a lawyer laughing his head off. And
I've seen those recently.
you have?
Yeah,
Well, maybe
I
lawyers
actually
have-
was making a photo shoot specifically with an attorney a short time ago, and I was looking at what is trendy right now, and some of them literally are laughing on their websites. I guess the way they're trying to portray the image is changing.
Maybe they're trying to get lawyers to be
Friendly,
approachable and friendly. I'm not so sure I buy that one, but sorry, lawyers. Some of my good friends are lawyers, but yeah, I think that's a very good thing to do, is to interview the photographer. You don't have to do a face-to-face, although I think that's very useful, because if you feel comfortable in the presence of the photographer, that the photographer doesn't appear to be too aloof or arrogant, because some professional photographers can appear that way. So it's a whole combination of things for somebody in that scenario that doesn't understand quite.
It is indeed important. The professional commercial photographer is not professional only with the camera, but also professional with his people skills. It's part of the job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially if it's a photographer who is working with portraits. I mean, you can be a hermit if you're doing real estate, but if you're working with portraits, you have to be people's person one way or another.
Yeah, that's right. One of the things that I find, without kind of going over, I mean, obviously I do a lot of headshots in the studio. I do a lot of portrait sessions, and I think the one thing that a commonality that I find between all of those shoots is how many people say to me afterwards how much fun the shoot was.
No, that's actually a very important point.
And I think I mentioned in the last episode, the last one that I shot, I spend my time talking.
Yeah, actually,
Getting people at ease.
Yeah,
And, as the viewers are finding out now, it's a very complex question that we're asking, and there are many factors to take into consideration. But hopefully, what we're doing is we're giving people enough information to be able to make educated choices when it comes to hiring the right photographer.
Well, it's definitely a good start. I mean, we can't cover the whole photography, and of course there is also such thing as reviews, which helps, but again, reviews could be lying reviews. That could be a client who just didn't like the way he appeared on the shot. I mean, most of the people, no matter how good the photo is, no matter how professional the portrait is, they still wouldn't like how they look on camera. And actually, if it is the proper portrait lens, they would like themselves even less because of what have changed recently. Most of the people are used to being photographed on their cell phone.
That's
and
correct.
the cell phone is a wide angle lens, not
It is.
super wide, which distorts you completely, but a wide one, which actually makes you to look thinner and taller.
Yeah.
So when you compare that to the portrait lens, most of the individuals would believe that they look too massive and too realistic.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, what happens with cell phones as well is that they tend to wash out the features quite a bit, so everybody's skin looks very smooth.
That's another thing. Yes, the good portrait lens would be good enough to make diagnosis on the dermatological problems of the photograph.
Which is where our lighting comes into play. But
that's exactly part of it.
again, we kind of stray away a little bit, but I'm hoping that our viewers do get enough from this to be able to, and
that's actually our second section, and we will have a few minutes left to finalize our conversation.
Big Mark.
Hello, this is Alex IG from Single Shot with the next single trick. Today we're going to be talking about uneven lighting. More often you have to deal with just one strong source of light. The strongest one, of course, would be the sun. And when it happens, half of your object is lit very brightly and another half is very dark, just like my face right now. Is there anything you can do about it? Sure. You can have professional lighting equipment, you can have professional light bouncing screens and many other things. But the simplest and easiest thing you can use, especially if you're doing it in casual environment, is a regular piece of paper. Put it right against the direction of light and you will get the source of light balanced and your light being just right. Alright, we're back. So we wanted to talk about the turnaround.
Yeah, absolutely. As we just mentioned very briefly in the break, Alex, all of this is great. You found the photographer, you found the guy that can do the photographs that you want. He's creative, he's pleasant. All of his photographs give you a good feel. How long is it going to take for him to get, or her, to get that final product back to you? Editing. Because we have scenarios where the guy turns up, he does a great job on the shoot, everybody's happy, the client loves the photographs on camera or tethered, and then he takes 3 months to get the photographs edited and back because his workflow is ridiculous.
I've seen this happening.
Something else, yeah, absolutely. I've seen wedding photographers especially falling into that trap.
Well, yeah, they're known for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So something that you've got to be very conscious of. I mean, especially if you're on deadline, which most people are, especially with magazines. You know, you've got 2 weeks before print deadline and stuff like that. So
Well, in this situation, it definitely would be in a pickle, and definitely 3 months for development is excessive, but there is a reason why it's not available next morning.
yeah,
And
generally speaking, I would say if you can get everything back within a week, then you know that's a pretty reasonable
that's
turnaround
pretty
time.
healthy promise to make, and if a photographer is a good professional, something very realistic to keep. And as again we was mentioning in the break, one of the big things for a client to consider when they talk to a photographer is how the price of the job is formed, because a lot of them just don't understand what they're being charged for.
Right.
Basically, the standard formula for photography, hourly rate multiplied by 3, and by 3 is time on shooting plus double the time for processing, and this is the realistic expectation most of the time.
Yeah. Often I hear that, and we all hear it. Why are you so expensive?
That's the reason.
People were used to the old days of film, so they said, well, there's no film, so all you're doing is you're taking a couple of photographs and then you're here for an hour and then you're gone. Well, yeah, you're right. Double that, whatever time you spent on that shoot, you're going to have to double up with that in editing.
And depending on the nature of photography, it could be tenfold, not double.
It could be, quite easily, yeah. So you have to take that post-production into account, definitely.
Well, so I think we actually had very comprehensive guidance for people how
I
to
hope
hire
so.
the right photographer. Thank
Me
you very
and
much.
Alex.
Absolutely. That is not an advertisement, that's a joke. All right. Thank you very much, Neil.
Alex,
It was a
thank
pleasure
you, sir.
to see you again. Hopefully
Likewise.
many more times, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Everybody, watch Alex's shows.
Thank you.
I hope you found that worth watching as much as I did. I'm Mark Unger for Roundtable. Thanks for watching.